Well, we've done a number of these off scripts and they've been great fun so far. But this really is something different, distinctly off script. Possibly the most famous sporting family from Manchester or Bury, depends which way you look at it. And there are very, very few families that can say that all three children represented their country. So I'm delighted to welcome, well, I would say welcome Gary, but I feel like I've spoken to him more than ever these days. So Gary's just kind of out there somewhere. But particularly good afternoon to Phil and Tracey Neville as well. Good afternoon, all of you.
Good afternoon, Geoff.
First of all, the most important question is how, Tracey, I'll start with you. How are you?
I'm good, Geoff. I'm enjoying my mat leave. Got all the country enjoying it with me at the moment. And yeah, just taking up a little bit of space in my personal life, really. It's good. Enjoying it. And it's good that they've isolated us so I don't have to see these two on a regular basis. So it's a win-win for me.
That's nice.
Phil, how is it for you? Because obviously you've got a squad to maintain and stay in touch with. How difficult is it for you just operationally being manager of the England women's team under these circumstances?
Well, I think we were in New York when it broke 2.5 weeks ago. So we were isolated when we was in New York. So when we came back, we were fully aware of the severity of it. And I think the first week we've sort of like give them a little bit of breathing space, and then they got into their training programs, and we've been doing a lot of sort of like virtual video calls. And I think the last probably 3 or 4 days is probably they've hit a little bit of a mental brick wall in terms of the training. So we've had to find really innovative ways to keep them entertained, engaged, and I've got to say, it's the most important thing is that everyone's safe and everyone stays away from this virus. I think the training and the football is secondary, really, but we have had to be really innovative in the way that we've engaged with them.
Now, so we don't talk over each other, we'll go in order of seniority in these sibling rivalry stakes. In Gary, obviously senior, and then older of Tracey and Phil. Is Tracey, I'm right in saying?
Yeah,
12 minutes.
12 minutes.
Yeah, best 12 minutes of your life, I bet. so we'll go Gary, Tracey, and then Phil. Gary, let me start with you. Growing up in any household, you always have sibling rivalry when there's more than one child. What did it add to sibling rivalry, the fact that you were all sports people as well? Was there a sporting rivalry as well? And bear in mind, both of your parents, both very sporty as well.
Yeah, I mean, we were everything that we did was around sport. It felt like in the summer it was cricket, in the winter it was football. We always went to netball and rounders with my mum. She played netball in the winter and then obviously rounders in the summer. So we always, wherever we were, every single night it felt like we were out. And then obviously when we got to 7, 8 and 9, we started playing ourselves. So it just integrated my mum and dad's sporting lives with obviously the fact that my mum and dad worked at Bury, and then obviously we were playing as well. It just felt like there wasn't a day where something wasn't going on, and me and Phil used to go and watch United when we were younger with my dad. I don't know what Tracey was doing, to be fair, when we went to, I know she was left at home.
Geoff, this is what I have to put up with, you know. I'm like second rate in the family. It's all around Gary. It's all around Gary.
Tracey, I can tell you it's exactly the same for the rest of us at Sky Sports, and there's nothing changed there. So what was it like for you then, Tracey, then, when your brothers were off doing their thing? What was it like for you?
I think we used to be, me and my mum used to have a bit of quiet time. I were at netball most times of the week, and mum used to take me along. And I think their sport probably took over more because there were two of them. So I had to go out and watch them quite a lot, which when you watch Philip bat for cricket, that was pretty tedious. I was actually glad he chose football in the end, because he honestly used to be in for about 3 hours. So I was actually glad that he chose a sport that were over in 90 minutes. I'd have still been watching him bat now.
Such a bad quality, innit? Such a bad quality.
Philip used to occupy the crease, the old Geoff Boycott analogy. He'd stay there. He would stay there for hours at a time. It was tedious.
That's not fair, Phil, because I know the famous quote, Michael Vaughan said the best cricketer he ever played against was Phil Neville.
Yeah, it's horrible, isn't it? I mean, no, but to be fair, I was an opening batter, and Gary was like It was you, Gary. You was like Ian Bolton, Freddie Flintoff. He used to come in and crash bang wallop and get himself out and cost us a game sometimes. So I was more cultured and kept the ball on the floor. But no, I think even though we didn't probably see that much of Tracey playing, we were always interested in her.
Didn't they used to call you Pad Rash? Were you called Pad Rash at one point, Phil? Because you were in that long.
Well, okay, again, trying to keep some order and discipline here, which has got absolutely no chance. How much do you think the fact, your dad, the late great Nev, was a gifted cricketer himself, and played to a very, very good standard, and obviously mum with netball and rounders, how much do you think your own successes in sport is down to genetics and also the encouragement of your parents, and also being brought up in a sporting household?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't just, our parents obviously just completely committed their lives to us in terms of taking us everywhere, but it wasn't just our parents, it was our grandparents as well. My mum's mum and dad in particular, who would take us places. And like you say, I think our whole life was sports. In some ways, it can be a saviour for families, really, and for young people growing up. And for us, we had nothing. There was never any time to actually lose our discipline and do something else, or get sidetracked and get distracted, because every single day felt like it was a sporting day. We used to go to school early in the morning, an hour earlier, so we could play football on the yard if it was us, or Tracey would do, a thing, play netball or other things.
He wasn't even bothered, Trey. He wasn't even bothered, was he? Just do your thing.
As long as I'm just looking after, guys, as long as I'm looking after his kids, that's all that he matters about these days.
I just remember we got out of the car together. I do. No, but I know Tracey used to go and play netball and rounds, and we'd go off and play football. And every single day there was a sport to play. And when we spent a lot of time at the rounders and netball with my mum, we used to love watching mum play netball and rounders. It was amazing. So from that point of view, my mum played in a team at rounders that won the league 19 years on the bounce, believe it or not, Bolton Road Ladies. And she was the real determined sports person in the family. My dad loved sport, loved football, loved cricket. And we were immersed in it every single day. And to be fair, that's why we just you obviously take a lot from your parents. They set us the sort of, they set the standard for us in terms of what we liked and what our hobbies were.
Tracey, what do you think was the biggest thing you got from your parents that contributed to your sporting success?
I think discipline, really. I think and respect. They always said, if you respect the people that you're with, they'll give you that encouragement and respect back. They were also invested in us, and I think that was huge. They never refused to take us anywhere. They always said, if you're committed, we will take you. You can achieve whatever you want. And they never put any barrier in our way. And people think sometimes that our parents were, could have been trophy parents, but they definitely weren't. They only took us to places that we wanted to go and what we were committed to. And if we didn't show commitment to anything, then they weren't invested in it. And I think that was huge in the way that we've really attacked our careers going forward, because I feel that when we do commit to something like the head coaches and managerial stuff, we do commit 100% and put our whole lives in it. And I think that's huge for our family.
Phil, was there ever, if you like, a cross-pollination of sport as siblings, as in to help Tracey, would you play netball or rounders with her? Or if you and Gary were practicing your football, would you get Tracey involved in the back garden?
I was the better footballer, Jeff. Jeff, I was the better footballer.
Really?
They just didn't have any football when I was younger.
Did you used to play with these two and give them a good whipping then?
Yeah. Take them on.
Look, I think you talk about influences of our parents. My dad obviously people think as a cricketer, but my mum was incredible. She would play cricket with us. She would play football. She actually played football for her town team, the first ever girl to do that in the town. So Mum used to take us everywhere. We used to join in with the netball. The rounders was probably the best one because it was similar to cricket. We used to go down there and play rounders with obviously Tracey while my mum was playing. So there was cross-pollination without a shadow of a doubt, because whether there was a bat or a ball, we just got told or we got encouraged just to join in because we made so many friends and we learned great discipline about it.
I didn't make that many friends.
I used to use us. That was what I was for Jeff.
although it's obviously a serious subject, in fairness to Gary, he's been self-isolated for years, hasn't he? He's been ready for this. Now, Phil, I want to ask you, I want to pick up on what Tracey claims. Obviously, we already know that she's the best coach amongst the three of you, but she's now claiming she's the best footballer as well.
No. To be fair, she was, and my mum was an incredible footballer. She was like, and she was the aggressive one. She was the determined one. She was the one that, if we fell down, she would just tell us to get back up, and that rubbed off on us. And Tracey I remember she used to wicket keep when we used to play cricket. She used to go in goal or play out when we used to play football. I think back then it didn't really matter to me, Gary or Tracey, what sport it was or what gender it was. We just played, and we never batted an eyelid.
Again, for Tracey and for Phil, because Gary is the eldest and his success came first, did his success put pressure on you two, or did it encourage you?
I think it encouraged us. I think the only time we felt pressure was when we passed our driving test for the first time. I think that's when we started to put pressure on each other to pass first time. I think that's the only time we've been competitive. But I think we were immersed in it. And I don't think it was because Gary's done that, we wanted to achieve the same. I think our lives paralleled, and it felt that with Gary only being 18 months older than us, it felt that we weren't far behind him, and that it felt natural to follow in his footsteps and then be a role model for us in the way he attributed himself and the way he carried himself. And, he, in a way, become a really great mentor. And even now, both my brothers are that.
I think he was a guide. He was a guide for me because my first love was cricket, and I really wanted to be a cricketer. And then obviously Gary joined United, and he used to come home. And every single night he used to come home, tell us all about his day, say the fact that he probably went into the first team dressing room, mixed with Mark Hughes, Brian Robson, our heroes, cleaned their boots or whatever job he had to do. And that was like a guide for me in terms of he set the standard for what actually you needed to do to become a professional footballer. And I just followed probably in his slipstream in terms of the decision that I had to make at 14, 15 to choose between cricket and football.
Gary, why do you only ever call your brother Philip?
To be honest with you, Jeff, I don't. If you notice, I never call you Shreevesy. I hate nicknames, so I always call people by the first name and the full name. So people call Tracey Trey and Trace. I always Tracey and Philip and Jeff. And the only people I use the nicknames for are Giggsy, Scholesy and Butty. They're the only people I think in the whole world that I use nicknames for.
And Bex.
Who's Bex?
He got Bex in there, didn't he? Best mate.
Name drop. You know what I
mean? What was it like though when it transferred into your careers, particularly when you were at United together, and one of you's left in a squad or one is left out, or because no brothers' careers is a rise exactly the same level. What was that like?
I can only reflect. I think there were one time we went down to Wembley, and Gary had always played right back for the United team, and in this particular time he'd been dropped and not even put on the subs bench. I think he'd been put in the stand, hadn't you, Gaz?
I was on the bench.
Were you? Oh, I didn't see you. I didn't see you warming up. And then Philip had obviously overtook Gary, and Gary had always been the leader and always been the one who started achieving more than us. And I think that for me was absolutely amazing for Philip to be right back, but at the same time it was really gutting to see someone being dropped for Gary. And at the time I think Gary did something similar to Paul Parker at the time, and for us we didn't feel that. But then when it was Gary and Phil, for me, mum and dad, that was a real difficult time, and particularly for their wives as well, because we're such a close family. And you're trying to grieve for one, but also be really happy for the other. And I just remember it was quite a difficult. I think that was a difficult time for me, my mum and dad at that.
I think that was my worst moment. I think it was '96 Cup final when I started and Gary was sub, and I remember I think the boss in the morning must have told Gary, and I knew, and we used to room together. And I really wanted Gary to start at right back and me at left back. But obviously Dennis Irwin started at right back and I was at left back. I think Gary had been playing centre back for a few games before it. And I'd just been picked in my first ever FA Cup final. And all I could think of was Gary being upset and disappointed that he wasn't playing in this big game. The caveat to that was I think he got on, Gaz. Did you get on? I think
no.
One minute. He got on at the end because he got on at the end, which meant absolutely everything. Then the second one was when I went to Everton. My whole family were Man United fans, and we played at Old Trafford. And all my family sat in the United end. I think Tracey sat in the Everton end, just out of support for me. And I think that showed that I'm the favourite brother, really. To be honest with you,
Did you? Did you?
No, I tell you what, I did. But remember when we went down to Wembley when you played United at Wembley? Was it in the semi-final?
Yeah.
And Everton had organised a trip and United had organised a trip. And my best friend Karen is an Everton fan, and me and Karen had been the only ones who went down to support Philip. And we won that day. And we won, Phil. We won that day.
When I was left out in the cup final, I didn't quite remember it like that. I remember Tracey coming in on the Thursday or Friday laughing at me because Philip was playing in front of me. And I don't remember Philip breaking stride, to be honest with you, that morning.
It sounded good though, didn't it, Trey?
Yeah, it did sound good.
I'm really gutted for you, Gaz.
Phil, I don't think he's got me at it now. Philip, never called you that in my life. Phil, the other day, this might surprise you, Gary and I were doing one of these chats, and he actually got quite emotional, just casting his mind back all those years ago from when you left Manchester United to go to Everton. A, does it surprise you that he is emotional at all?
Yeah.
And B, what do you remember of it?
Well, I read it actually the other day, and I've got to say, he didn't say anything to me at the time, which is probably typical of Gary, because he doesn't get really that emotional about things. But Gary did come round to Sir Alex's house. I remember there was one or two things happening, and then Gary just rung me. My dad was away, I think, in Malta. He said, "Look, let's go round to the boss's house." And we went round. My wife stayed in the car, and literally that's when my Man United career ended. I say it was one of the best moments that I've ever had, because I was sat in Sir Alex Ferguson's house. His wife had made us a coffee, and we did it in the most amazing way, where he was helping me in the next stage of my career, telling me that he didn't want me to go, but I did. I can relate to Nicky leaving and Bex leaving, who left just before us. They were sad moments, but in terms of Gary sort of like showing his emotion to me, he didn't say anything, I don't think. Goodbye.
Tracey, you're probably the best judge of this. Is it a case of unspoken love between these two, which is probably best showcased when they're in the tunnel together at Goodison Park that day?
I think it's an emotion that probably is a lot hidden between them two, but I think Gary's not really, like, say, an emotional person, but I feel that that's what makes him a great team player, because he wants to bring everyone along with you. And you know, even though you feel that you don't talk to him that much or see him that much, I feel that he's always thinking of you, and he's thinking of your next steps, and he's always there to support you whether you need. And obviously, when you see your younger brother, we were actually heartbroken when Philip was told he weren't going to have a future at Man United and was going to Everton, and because no Neville would ever want to leave Man United. And I think that's what my dad brought us up to believe, that we were going to see they were going to see the careers out at Man United. So, you know, to drive obviously all the way over to Everton on a weekly basis actually become really good for us in the end, because they were a great club and the people there were so welcoming, and it was such a homegrown club that actually it was probably the best move for Philip at the time. But at the time it didn't feel like that, because like you say, we were brought up to think that Gary and Phil would always end their careers at United.
They booed him for 8 months.
That was because of you.
Yeah, that's because you give us a bad reputation, guys. They like us too.
What were those days like for you, Tracey, on match day of Everton against Manchester United?
Like Philip said, I probably was the one who supported Phil. We always probably, from a young age, used to gang up on Gary a little bit. He was probably always outnumbered.
Do you like me better, Trey?
Pardon?
You like me better?
I feel like we had 12 minutes more together, Phil.
Yeah.
9 months more. No, I don't. I don't know. I think we come from a family of massive Reds, and it'd be very hard for my dad or my mum to sit in the blue end. But for me, it was about sitting and being supportive of Philip at the time. So, yeah, it didn't. For me, it was about the person and not the team, even though I've supported Man United all my life. But it was heartbreaking, Geoff. Philip is looking over it, saying it was the best moment of his life. But I saw some huge heartbreak from the family over that particular period.
When you look back as well, you two, can you honestly look at that picture, Phil and Gary, of yourselves in the tunnel at Everton? You know, brothers in arms, been through everything together. You don't even look at each other.
I couldn't believe it, Geoff, when the fixtures came out, and it was it first game of the season?
The first game for Everton. My first game.
Yeah, Phil's first game for Everton's against United. I mean, just like, oh my God. So you couldn't believe that the fixtures came out like that. And no, I think, to be fair, I would never, ever in a million years playing for Manchester United look over at anybody that I was playing against on the opposite side of the tunnel. Never in a million years. Why would you do that?
It's your brother.
No, but I'm playing for Manchester United.
It was a proud moment, though, because you were both captain, weren't you, at the time?
Yeah, no, look,
so
I didn't want anything to happen. I didn't want anything bad to happen to him or anything like that.
Well, not that bad.
Not that bad.
No, but generally, the idea that you brought up to play for United, Nobby Stiles, Eric Harrison, Sir Alex Ferguson, and nothing else matters. Nothing else matters. And Phil, to be fair, would be the same.
Yeah, but you listen.
I was actually expecting a good afternoon, Gaz. To be fair, I've got to say I wasn't surprised with your reaction because I know what you like, but I was expecting. All right, Philip, something like that. Do you know what I mean?
Anything.
I mean, why would you expect a good afternoon, Philip, when you'd not had one in the previous 28 years?
Just an acknowledgement, maybe. I mean, it's not much, is it, Trey? I mean,
no.
Had you not already been in the ref's room and shaken hands and stuff?
No,
we don't shake hands.
We didn't speak in the referee's room.
No, you don't shake hands with your brother. I mean, Geoff, one other thing I would say, Philip, to be fair, he rings up, like obviously my dad's not here anymore, but he would ring up my mum and dad every single day, 2-3 times a day. He probably rings you every single day, Tracey.
Yeah, he does.
He's like Phil's very affectionate and very.
He's a people person.
Yeah, Phil's a people person. He rings people up. He's
friendly, Gaz. It's called friendly and being sociable.
Is it just normal? Just normal.
Gaz.
Philip works on the theory that he'll ring someone up and he'll ask how they are. I work on the theory that they'll ring me up if there's something wrong with them.
Yeah.
No, it's
That's why Jeff turns around and goes, "Why do you only ring me up when there's something wrong?" And you're like, "You don't ring me up for any other reason, Gaz."
Let's not go there. That's a whole different program. We know we know he's different. Tracey, I've always said about Gary, if he was in the army, as far as he was concerned, he'd be the only one in step.
The thing is, if Gary rings you, what happens is you end up ringing Phil and my mum, and then you used to ring me dad to see what Gary wanted because you thought there was a problem.
Yeah.
You used to ring all the family before you rung Gary back to see I needed to get the heads up on something.
The alarm bells go.
Yeah,
when Gary's number comes up, the alarm bells go.
Yeah, but if you do ring him, it's that really warm and friendly. When you ring him, it's not hello, it's always yes, Geoff. As though there has to be a reason.
Never ask him how he is. Never ask him how he is.
When you text him, I text him a picture of like Nev, and he'll go, "Thanks, Tracey."
Tracey.
Geoff, bring Nev in. But Nev's Tracey's little baby. For those of you who don't know, bring him in.
Hang on, not. He's asleep. I know he's asleep. So hang on. So we'll get to him. before we get to Nev, of course, probably as per usual and completely wrongly, this chat has already been dominated by the boys' career. Tracey herself had a fantastic career. Not only managed England, of course, but over 80 caps for her country as well. How proud were you two of Tracey's sporting achievement? And also, in the same way as you were progressing in your careers at your clubs, how aware were you of how far Tracey was going?
Philip?
We were definitely aware. I was 100% definitely aware. The problem probably 15 years ago was the visibility of netball. You very rarely saw netball on TVs, and because our schedules clashed, we only ever went to watch netball when our schedules didn't clash. And I think if I look back at probably the most nervous moments I've ever had, you think about the times I watched Tracey play at the GMEX in Manchester or at the arena for when she was a player for England, and then when she was a coach, it was unbearable sometimes. I mean, she won the league for her club, Manchester Thunder, in the last kick of the last shot of the game. Unbelievable moment. And then the Commonwealth Games success, I'll never forget. One of my best moments probably in my sporting life, watching that, the celebrations afterwards, obviously going out to Australia for the Worlds to watch her out there was an unbelievable moment, even though it was probably one of the saddest moments of our lives. Actually watching her coach and manage England and getting the rewards for all the success and sacrifice, I think it's probably been one of my proudest moments.
I mean, Geoff, I want to be really honest in the sense that when Tracey was playing netball when she was younger, it was a thing that was happening, but because we were so immersed in our own careers and Tracey was immersed in her career, you know that she's playing for England and you're proud of what she's doing, but you're just really concentrating on your own thing. And I think it's only in the last few years really that I've recognised Philip smirking.
You didn't care, Trey.
Geoff, no. Can I tell you a story? One day I rang Gary up really upset. I wanted him to come and see me. He didn't even know my address or where I lived.
Geoff,
he was immersed, though, Trey. He was immersed. You know, he was immersed.
There's a little bit of depth to that. He moved to this place in Chester and not told me where she lived.
That you actually went and bought with me. You actually were there. You made me buy that apartment.
Yeah.
I think in Gary's defence, I think since we retired, that our best probably memories of when she's been a coach, because we've been able to watch her as a supporter, travel around watching her. I've got to say, actually fall in love with watching netball even more than what we've done. And actually, would you agree, Gary?
Yeah, I think that's what I'm saying. So obviously when you retire from football, I did 8-9 years ago, Phil did a little bit later, my life completely changed. When I look back, really, when I was a football player at United, I mean, you just said there about not saying hello to Philip in the tunnel. I didn't really care about anything else other than playing for United. I genuinely didn't. I was just like that. But then actually in the last few years, a number of things obviously have happened. Tracey, I think, along with the netball team that she had for England, the sport went from sort of here to there in terms of prominence. I think I've got 2 daughters. One of them's here. They play netball every single week, and they're obsessed with Tracey. And Tracey's, been amazing with them. Here's the other one. Sorry, the one's coming in.
Shall I drag mine in now?
Come here. And they're absolutely obsessed with Tracey. And then obviously 5-6 years ago, my mum and dad travelled all around for years watching every one of our games. But then when we retired, they literally every single week would go and watch Tracey's games, Tracey's coaching games. They travelled, obviously, my mum and dad travelled to Australia where my dad obviously died, and Tracey was coaching the World Championships. So from that moment, really, me and Philip both went over, obviously, at that time. And then I think it started to sort of occupy a lot more of our minds, and we become a lot more aware of what Tracey was doing, the impact that she was having, not just on the sport, but on obviously women's sport as well. And I think it was beyond that, really, that I started to realise the magnitude of what she was achieving, what she was doing, how good she was, obviously, as a coach. and things like that. And I think obviously now with Philip, even from a point of view of in the last few years, Philip's obviously been manager of the England women's team. You know, the impact that they're having on, or Tracey's obviously not at the moment, but the impact that they've had and are having on women's sport is enormous. And that's something that I am incredibly proud of. I have to say, pre-retiring from United, I didn't recognise most things in my life that were happening around me, Geoff, to be honest with you. And that's something maybe that I could regret now, but I wouldn't change it for the world because it's the way I was. But since then, definitely what they've both done in terms of coaching and what Tracey's particularly done in netball, and Philip, you know, it was a brave decision. You know, speaking to Philip before he took the England women's job, I remember having conversations with him, and he was so determined to go and do it that you've got to say that that's where I think I've become more proud in the last few years of what both of them have done, because obviously I've become more aware of what's going on around me, and I think that's, you know, it's incredible what they've achieved.
Tracey, how do you reflect on that time in Australia? One of
You're
the
going to cry now, Geoff, aren't you?
No, you know I wouldn't do that. But looking back, do you almost wonder how you got through it? You're there coaching your country, a very proud time, but then also your dad falls ill, and unfortunately, sadly, ultimately passes away, and you were so incredibly close to your dad as well. When you looking back at it now, what do you think?
It was a really hard time because I'd actually gone into the job in probably a really hard way. Like, the previous England coach had been obviously removed from the post. I'd only gone in 6 weeks prior to the World Cup. So the angst around the post was particularly difficult for me personally anyway. But to be offered the England coach was something I always wanted to do. And it was interesting that was the first trip that I was financially able to pay for my mum and dad to fly business class to Sydney. You know, it was something that I wanted to do for my mum and dad. And obviously it was the proudest moment of their life to take my dad to Australia, which is something that he'd always wanted to do. I remember one day, the actual Wednesday when he actually passed away, I'd rung my mum, and you know, you just get a feeling that there was something wrong before I rung my mum. And I just remember telling me that he'd been taken to hospital, and I just knew instantly that there was going to be something wrong. And I think the next probably, 36 hours, probably the most difficulties of my life, because I was trying to support my mum. I obviously was trying to support the team. My dad was on a life support, and at the time my mum thought he was going to come through, but the nurse and doctor had shared with me that he wasn't. So I was having conversations with my brothers who were back in England, and it was interesting. Throughout my life, my brothers always have protected me, and they weren't there at that particular time, which I really struggled with. And I just remember they both got on a flight straight away and come out, and a bit like what the Neville family do, they come in, they cause chaos, and then they get out. And I think the hardest thing for me was that the support I had in Sydney was then suddenly taken away from me, and I was left obviously in Australia. And in the end, my partner got on a flight with 24 hours notice and come out. And it just felt, I just remember that, you know, the right thing to do was for my brothers to take my mum home. But then I'd lost everybody at that time. And I felt that was probably one of the hardest times of my life. And I think, but it also drove us on as a family to, and me as a family. And obviously out of that now, with me retiring, has come Nev, who I attribute to the most important people in my life, which was my dad. Gary gets called Nev, Philip gets called Nev, and I obviously get called Nev. And, you know, I felt that everything that's happened was for a reason, but in a way, because of the closeness that we had, I felt that I was able to drive on in that particular post and start to achieve, which at first I didn't think I would be able to without the support of my dad, because he's been the biggest mentor to me all my life.
I mean, were there times where you thought, I can't get through this? Because that's an enormous ask. When you lose somebody so close to you, that's a devastating thing in your life anyway. But to have to prop up your mum, wait for the boys to arrive, and still be the head of the national team, that's sounds impossible for most people. Where did you find the will?
That was a really hard time. I think for me, what it recognised was that the way I'd come into the post was that I wasn't around a team. And you talk about team culture and people getting around you in what-if scenarios, and that wasn't the case then. And it was a very isolated scenario and very lonely. But I don't think it actually hit where I felt that I'd lost everything was till after. And I think when I went back and got given the full-time England post, I think that was when probably for the next year I felt probably the most loneliest, because we were probably going through in the Roses the most difficult time. We hadn't got great results. A lot of players weren't coming into the programme. We were setting up a new era of the centralised professional programme. And I think then was probably the loneliest time probably of my life, where I really did start to miss my dad. At the time, through them 10 days in the World Cup, I think I was on autopilot, and I didn't feel that I had the people around me that that could affect my life. But afterwards, I felt that was probably the most loneliest time. And the second loneliest time was probably when Gary, Phil and my mum left Australia.
Geoff, I think Tracey doesn't give herself probably any justice really, because we obviously arrived out there. She had a game. I went to the game and watched Tracey's team play, and then after the game, I then waited and we went to the hospital and turned my dad's life support machine off, and she had to sit through a game for her country, knowing full well that in 60 minutes there's a car waiting outside. We delayed, obviously, the machine being taken off just so Tracey could be there for us to say our goodbyes. And I think she's right. I think the reason that she carried on was a little bit of my mum's spirit, really, of get out there, carry on with what you're doing, you know, get up and get on with it, dust yourself down. I just moved to Spain and I was committed to coming back to England to be with my mum. And she would say she would never speak to me again if I did that. She wanted us to carry on with our lives. And I think it was the spirit of my mum, really, that not forced Tracey, but kept probably Tracey keep fighting in those difficult times.
And I think Dad as well. I think if, you know, that was Dad's dream as well. And, it, you know, you know, would you do a different thing again? You don't know until you're in that scenario. I've seen, players' dads die and they've reacted to it in a different way. And I still now don't think I would have come home. I think the option was given to me, do you want to go home with your family? There's no way I would have left that, because it wasn't something that I felt I wanted to do. I was there to do a job, and there was nothing I really could do at home because my brothers were obviously supporting my mum at the time. So it felt that, you know, it was something I wanted to finish.
It's not, Tracey, it's not meant to sound crass, but knowing your dad as fortunately I did, what a smashing character, what a great guy. I can hear you laughing, Phil. All right, Nev and I may have had one or two afternoons together.
It was a bad influence, Geoff. That's what you want.
But Tracey, seriously, generally not trying to sound trite or cliche, was there part of you thinking, what would Nev have wanted? He wouldn't have been happy if I'd gone home. He wouldn't have happy. Oh, he wanted me.
Like Philip said, my mum, you don't realise how strong my mum was until that particular time. However, it was my dad that drove me on, because he was the one who drove me on in a lot of, you know, he was so passionate, so strong-willed, get in there, get a job done. He was that sort of guy, you know, you're committed to something, you finish the job off. And, you know, all our lives, that's what we've had to do. And I think for him, if I'd have flown home, he would have thought it was pointless. You know, for him, you know, to watch his little girl, you know, in a World Cup, get the England job, he'd watch his sons. For him, his life was complete, you know, for him. For us, we wanted more of him. We wanted him to see more. But for him, that was his attitude. My life, you know, I've seen everything. Even if I go tomorrow, that he lived his life like that. And I think that is something that we, you know, I wish I could do that, but I don't. I'm a worrier, so I wish I lived my life like he did.
Just Philip, you just mentioned, but just moving on from there, you mentioned Valencia. Yeah. For a pair of brothers who aren't necessarily open in their affection towards each other, what was it like for you two working together at Valencia? And also, I'll ask Tracy, what was it like observing them working together at Valencia?
Well, I loved it. Honestly, Gary rented a house round the corner with obviously his two girls, and it took me back to the United days where we did everything together. We shared moments 8-9 hours a day. We talked every minute of every day. So it was absolutely fantastic. I mean, it was a difficult period, obviously, because the team didn't do as well as what we thought. But I think what Gary doesn't really probably give himself credit, and I see all the interviews that he does about management and about his time at Valencia. He actually did some really, really good work, and the team, and I study all the training sessions and the games that we played. The team played some really good football. He was bloody good at his job. And I firmly believe that he should give management a crack again. I've got to say that. I know he's made his mind up, obviously, and he spoke openly about that. But I saw and worked for a manager that could be an outstanding manager. The difficulty was the language barrier. But for me personally, I worked with my best friend, my brother, in a difficult situation, in a situation where he threw himself out there into a cauldron of a club that is notorious for sacking managers. But from a personal point of view, the minute that he left, I wanted to leave straight away, because obviously I'd committed 3 years to living in Spain. But the minute that he left, I wanted to leave that job as well, because ultimately my loyalty was with my brother.
Gary, do you think there's a scenario potentially in the future where all three of you could work together?
I think I could work with Tracey, I've got to say.
Yeah.
No. I mean, from a coaching point of view, I think obviously working in women's football, I think there's definitely something. We had the netball girls into St George's Park to have a day, and there's definitely cross-pollination where Tracey would be outstanding in women's football in terms of the way that she sets her teams up. Oh, there it is.
Stop conversation.
Yeah.
Hey, here he is. The superstar.
So I can definitely see myself working with Tracey again in terms of sport. Gary, I'm not sure. No, I'm not sure where he's going. You know what I mean?
Hey, quick word, Phil. Quick word on you. A tough time of late.
Yeah.
What do you do to get back on track?
Well, it's been a tough time, but we've got no tournaments. We're experimenting. We're trying to build a new team, and we're trying things out. We're trying to get to the next level, and for that we have to take risks. And we've took big risks since the World Cup, but knowing full well that these risks aren't really going to cost us. And I think that the pleasing thing is we've got a group of young players coming through now that I think can be as good as any players that we've had. They've had the new sort of like way of coaching, physical fitness and the nutrition, and they are going to be absolutely outstanding. So I love the job that I'm doing. I think what I've learned over the last 2 years is whatever level you coach at or whatever gender you coach, if you love and you've got a great set of players, then you've got to stick to it. And yes, it's been tough, but it's been tough because the bar was set so high after the World Cup.
Obviously, you're a fantastic sporting family, and you're obviously still competitive as well.
Yeah.
Gary talked about his goals. Big fans of Tracey, big netball players. I know you've been out running with your son Harvey of late as well, haven't you? But there appears to be some discrepancy about the times you posted and the distance you ran. Can you explain? Perhaps I could bring in Tracey. She might be able to help.
The Wi-Fi is bad here, Geoff. You broke up there. What was that?
I think the Wi-Fi is that bad, Geoff. He wanted to post his own results, but he decided to post Harvey's instead.
Prove it, Trey. No. The other day we went out and did a 5K, and he absolutely left me for dead. Honestly, and you try for like 1.5, 2K. I was sort of like leading, and then he just left me for dead. And I think there's a sign sometimes when you've just got to give up, and I think that was one of them.
Phil, you've not got away from the fact that you posted his results on your Insta as if you'd done it.
I didn't.
You did.
Prove it.
21. You did it in 23.
No, 21:38. How many people will watch this, Geoff?
That's what I wrote Harvey about last night, Philip. You know, when you caught us.
Not many will be watching if mine and Jeff's previous viewing figures or anything to go by.
They're watching now. Tracey's in it, definitely.
Yeah.
Listen, Where's Nev gone? Where is he? Where's the
Got him
little man
back.
gone?
He was going to cry.
Yeah.
So I was like,
He's a
Michael, we bring
star.
him back.
And that's the ultimate compliment to your dad, isn't it? To name him Nev as well.
Yeah, it's interesting when we were deciding a name, and I said, I want to call it after our dads, because I've met Michael on Father's Day. And then we were like, let's call it after our dads. And we were like, Nev, just seemed the right thing.
But it's the ultimate truth, because as you know, your dad, who didn't care at all, had so much the Mickey taken out of him for having as Neville. But in true Neville spirit, you've got exactly the same route, haven't you?
Yeah. Sorry, Geoff, I missed all that because he's just thrown up all down my top.
Basically, Tracey basically said that we don't have a problem with upsetting people.
No. Well, you don't, Gary.
Listen, fabulous to speak to the three of you and other associated members of the family. Continued good health, all of you. Stay safe and stay safe. Talk to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Philip. Thanks, Tracy.
Thanks, Gary.
Thanks, Philip.
Love you, Trey.
Love you.